It's about a minute after 11, and we still have 4 people joining us, but we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone for our first municipal virtual town hall meeting. Glad you're able to join us. My name is Dan Clark, and I'm the director of the Local Government Center. We've been doing these with counties for a little while here. We've been working with MACO and hosting these since May. I think we started in May, early June sometime, and we've been quite successful working with the counties in hosting these virtual town hall meetings. And we thought we'd initiate this with the municipalities, and so we've been working with the League of Cities and Towns to start. And we'll see how this goes. If you think this is valuable, please let us know. And if it's something worth your time, that we'll continue hosting these possibly every other week, if that seems to work in your schedule. So let us know. And as we get started here, I just want to let everyone know that you'll be muted. So we have you on mute. Ashley Kent, who's our, see Ashley there, she has got the con. She is in charge of the system now. I have relinquished all control. So she has the ability to mute you. But right now, I think everyone was on mute. And if you have a question or something you want to say, you have 2 options. One is in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You'll see a long list of the people that are participating. At the very bottom, it says chat. On my screen, it's orange. And if I click on chat, at the little arrow there, it'll expand that. And that's where you can type in a question. Ashley and I will be monitoring the chat box, and we'll be asking questions or relaying the question to the appropriate person who would be there to respond to that. So you can use the chat. Another option is if you can find your name under the participant list, and if you hover over your name, you'll notice that there is a hand, a little icon that looks like a hand. And if you have a question, you can click on that hand. It will light up that, and then Ashley or I will be able to find your hand. And when it comes time, we can then unmute you and allow you to ask your question. So you can either ask it live or you can ask it through the chat, and we'll read the question and have, and that way the questions that are on the chat will be memorialized in this recorded session. To let everyone know that this session will be recorded, and when it's done, the folks that are hosting this will then render the recording, and then they'll send us a link, and we will share that link on our website as well as on the League of Cities and Towns website. So if you want to refer someone, a council member or a mayor or somebody that wasn't able to participate, you can refer them to that link, and they can watch the session. It usually takes about 12 to 15 hours for us to get that link back. So you can watch for it tomorrow or later in the week. So on today's agendas, you saw that we sent out in the reminder. We'll have this discussion first about the reimbursement. The municipalities can get reimbursed for COVID-related activities. And so we're going to start out with that conversation first, and then we'll have a discussion about the census. We have Zach Brown, who's joined us here from the Census Bureau. Well, I'll let Zach introduce himself, but he's representing the folks from the census, and he'll talk about our response rate and what we can do to improve that response rate and the value that will be to all of us in our cities, counties, and state government. So with that, I'll turn the time over to Tim and allow him to introduce our other special guests that are joining us today. So Tim, we'll give you the mic. Maybe.
Am I muted?
There you go. We hear you now, Tim.
Okay, thank you, Dan. First, I'd like to welcome everybody to the first municipal town hall meeting. I've joined in with the county folks a couple of times, and I thought, you know, what an effective way to deliver information, but also address questions that you all are dealing with on a daily and weekly basis. Dan's already kind of gone over the agenda. We'd like to just give a brief overview, and I know you've all received a lot of communications and information from us. But we'd like to focus on the CARES Act and the local government reimbursement program, talk about the census and the status, and perhaps ways that you all can help get the turnout on the census up, and any other questions that you have. But I also see a special guest in Eric Bryson, the executive director of the Montana Association of Counties. Eric and Jason, I appreciate your ability to join us today. And Eric, I'd like to turn it over to you to see if you have anything to say before we jump in.
Eric, you're unmuted, but we're not getting any audio from you. I'm gonna try muting you and unmuting you again. How about now? Nope. Go to Jason. Go to Jason.
Okay.
Hi, Jason.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Jason. Jason
Well,
Riddle is the Deputy Director of the Montana Association of Counties. Jason, thanks for joining us today.
No, you're very welcome. So we've been doing these for a little while now. We found them quite valuable in expressing new occurrences with our ongoing work with the budget office, all the way ranging from that to just things that are going on at the local government level with dealing with the pandemic and operations. So we found these very valuable. I would like to point out that as we've maneuvered this pandemic, including funding and operational status, the league has been in lockstep with us in a lot of ways, and we really appreciate that relationship. Our ability to communicate and work together from the whole time I've been on board has been fantastic, and especially during these times. I hope that you all find these town halls as valuable as we think our membership has found them, and I will apologize for Eric's inability to run his machine.
Thank you, Jason. Dan, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can.
So, okay, why don't we then just go ahead and start out with the CARES Act reimbursement, municipal reimbursement program. As you know, both Eric Bryson and I sat on the COVID-19 task force with 22 other people, made recommendations early on in the program to the governor, and the immediate focus was on those immediately and mostly affected by the pandemic. People who had lost their jobs and unemployment, the medical industry with PPE and the ability to respond, getting PPE to our emergency services providers, and looking at the challenges that the nonprofit medical industry was having relative to our ability to respond. Those were the immediate priorities of our recommendations to the governor, knowing full well that local government would have a seat at the table with the governor's office to deal with unbudgeted COVID-related expenses and other eligible reimbursements under the law. We meet, the counties and the cities meet with the governor's budget director and his team, as well as the team from local government services who administer the program on a weekly basis. As you know, the program started March 12th, and we have been able to work with the governor's office and have tentatively set aside a minimum of $300 million to reimburse local government for their COVID-related expenses, which also includes all regular and overtime pay for first responder, public safety, and public health employees, police and fire. To date, I believe we've distributed about 76 million of the 300 million, and we anticipate this program running through the end of 2020, with the deadline for the final reimbursements due in January. The next opportunity to request for reimbursements, I understand, will open up September 8th and will run through, I think, September 28th, something like that. Amanda, is that correct? I think it's the 28th, but we'll clarify that.
The 25th.
So, or the 25th, okay. So with that, I think many of you on the call today have already submitted for reimbursements once or twice. Kelly Lynch, the Deputy Director for the League, is also on the line. Kelly, would you like to add anything before we open it up for questions and an exchange?
Well, I kind of put together a little. Why is that happening? I don't have my phone on. You got me, Ashley, fixed?
I muted Tim. I think we're getting feedback off of his speaker, so we'll mute him while you talk and then open him back up.
Okay. So I actually put together a little bit of a walkthrough on this because I think that's probably what's been missing. Actually, only about 30 of you have put in for reimbursement. And so we're trying to figure out if it's just a matter of not having the information that you need to know what you need to get reimbursed for, what you need to ask for. So I thought I'd kind of just walk through everything and give you just a little bit more detailed sense of what you can get. So I'm going to share my screen if I can figure this out.
Kelly, do you have never mind, you got this.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. Here we go. All right, hold on. I want to make sure you guys are seeing my web browser. Is everyone seeing my web browser now?
Yep, we're good to go.
Okay. So the first place you can go to get information about this is sfsd.mt.gov. And then it's LGSB, Local Government Services Bureau, and COVID relief. On that page, which you'll see here on the right, you can see they have the guidance document for reimbursement, which just basically gives you an overview of everything and what the rules are and what things are eligible. Basically, if something's eligible for FEMA, everything gets submitted together and then they make a determination if something's eligible for FEMA reimbursement. So it makes it pretty easy for you. They have the reimbursement form, which is here. Sorry, that's the certification form. Hold on, let me just click on this. It's actually an Excel spreadsheet. So that's this document here. So you can kind of use this to walk through how much you're going to put into each category. And it gives you some, basic categories here in the second column of what you would. Are you seeing my Excel spreadsheet right now? Okay, I got it. I know you always have to move what you're sharing.
So Kelly, it's telling us that we're seeing your web browser. So it might be only picking up your web application and not your screen.
Okay, how's that?
That's better.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so this second column here is basically are the categories that you can get reimbursement for. And then it kind of gives you specifics about what you need, and then what they need all the way over here is what they need from you to basically prove that you incurred those expenses. And I'll go through the eligible expenses here in a second. I just wanted to. So why, you know what? I really, really, really hate WebEx. Sorry. Okay. Is this, now are you seeing their website, Local Government Services website? Okay. So here's what I was talking about. The guidance document is here, which I think the form I just walked through, and then the certification form, which you basically have to fill out to say, look, we promise that we incurred these expenses and we're not lying to you. And then your governing body signs it. Then when you're ready to go, you go into Montana Department of Commerce. Are you seeing that site now? And then you click clear to apply. Like Tim said, it won't be open. The next time it'll be open is starting September 8th. So you won't see it up right now, but it'll have the local government reimbursement program listed here. And then you'll go in to do your application online and you can upload your form and all of those documents. So that just gives you kind of a sense of where it's at. Let's go back to that reimbursement form and I will show you, just point out some of the bigger ones that most people are putting in for. So essentially, probably the biggest one is the most important because it does not have to be an unbudgeted expense. The federal guidance from the Treasury Department held that certain employees are going to be presumed eligible because they're just being presumed to be COVID related during this period. And that's what Tim mentioned are the public health and safety employees, and essentially for public safety, any sworn officer, and that includes dispatch and detention. It includes your chief of police, it includes deputy chief of police. And so you can put in for those even if those were budgeted costs associated with paying those employees during that time period. You can't put in for their benefits, but you can put in for their regular pay and their overtime pay. So that's kind of the biggie. Then we've got some other employees, if you can show that they were substantially dedicated to COVID-related activities during this time period. You know, a good example that I've got was a city manager basically spent he feels like he spent, at least during the phase 1 period, almost his entire time on COVID-related work. Then he's putting in for showing that he was at least 2/3 time, and you will be reimbursed for that. For those, you need to go through showing your all your time periods and everything and showing what they were doing that was related to COVID. Then we get into what are really more of the actual reimbursed costs. So if you spend money to buy PPE, if you spent money to buy hand sanitizer, you modified your workstations, public areas so that folks were safe. You know, you bought stickers to put on the floor, you bought plexiglass to separate your workers from the public. Those kinds of things can all be put in for reimbursable expenses. MMIA took a vote to increase their health insurance costs by, I think it's 2.5%. Alan, jump in if I've got that wrong. That is a reimbursable expense specifically related to increase in insurance rates. COVID leave, you've had lots of people going out on COVID leave. The state will reimburse you if you have an actual kind of cash expenditure associated with that. So let's say you had someone out on COVID leave and you had to hire a temp employee to cover them during that time. That would be something that's eligible for reimbursement. If you had to pay a different employee overtime to cover the work that employee would be doing, that is reimbursable through the CARES Act. And then finally, we just recently got the administration to agree to pay for, I think it's up to $10 million in software to digitize public records so that folks don't have to come in person to get those public records and make those requests. A lot of our big cities have already been able to do that. But for those small towns that have had to kind of put this on the back burner for a while, this is your opportunity to get that kind of an equipment and software put in place. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff, but I think those are kind of hitting on the main ones. And then as Tim indicated, the next date for reimbursement, the deadline will be September 25th. Those will be for all expenses from everything basically starts in March. It's March 12th for those payroll costs. It's March 1st for everything else. And you can submit at any deadline all the way back to the March dates. You just can't obviously double submit. But if you have missed the deadline so far, it's not too late and you can go back and submit for everything before that. And then the next, so this first one, September 25th, that will be expenses up to August 31st. And then they'll do another one in November for expenses up to October 31st. And then they'll do a last one at the end of January that'll cover all expenses up to December 30th. And that's the date that's in the CARES Act itself. So I think that's just kind of a general overview. Is there anything anybody else wanted to jump in? And Jason, who knows this forward and backward as well, please feel free to jump in if you want.
About those municipalities that contract for law enforcement with the county, what's the expectation between that and with that relationship if they have an interlocal agreement with the county for law enforcement and the county is making a submission for reimbursement for their sheriff's department? How does that work with the funding? Does any of that come back to reimburse the city? Maybe Jason can respond to that as well.
So yeah, it's a great question. And this issue of shared costs has kind of come up in some other contexts as well. We've had some situation where like Gallatin County bought a bunch of PPE and then sold it to some cities in other counties. And the state has taken the position that they just want to reimburse once and then let the agreements between the local governments be worked out between them. So in that situation, Gallatin County got paid for all the PPE that they bought. And then the idea was that then they could get paid by Yellowstone County for the PPE that Yellowstone County bought from them and work it out amongst them. And I'm guessing it's the same for law enforcement. Jason, if you know something different, jump in.
So the eligible entity to ask for the reimbursement is the one that has the person on the payroll. So if the sheriff's department is covering the local municipality through a contract, the county would put in for the reimbursement. From there, it's up to each individual county and each municipality to have a conversation about what cost share or what sort of relief the town would get. But at this point, the applicant would be, or the submittal would come from the county, who would then get reimbursed for their staff's time. The contract between the municipality and the county is outside of that, and those need to be one-off discussions about what sort of savings could be passed back through.
We have a couple of questions in the chat and a couple of hands up. Do you guys want to address those now, or do you want to wait until after we hear from the census?
I think, Ashley, this is Tim. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I think we should address the questions now.
Okay.
Thanks to both Kelly and Jason for the overview.
Tim, I have one more comment on the data, the electronic data storage. We're asking our members to pre-submit for approval on those. The state is making a running tally of what those dollar amounts are adding up to towards that $10 million sort of agreed to cap. And the other reason I would recommend you get them pre-approved is to make sure that you can iterate to your members that the work has to be done, the invoice received and the invoice paid all by the end of the year. And so I'm really stressing that with our members to make sure that they don't get into an agreement with a vendor that can't perform in that timeline and then would make it so that it was not reimbursable.
Thank you, Jason. That's really good advice. So Ashley, I think if there are questions, you'll handle this part of the meeting.
Yeah, I'd be happy to facilitate the question piece. So we're going to start with the mic or the audio. Agnes had her hand up. So Agnes, I'm going to open your mic if you would like to ask a question. Are you there, Agnes? Uh-oh, we're getting no Agnes feedback. Okay, we'll come back to that, but she did put in the chat. So let's look at what she said in the chat. She said, I submitted the 2.7% increase on the MMIA premium. They denied it and would not pay. I had even sent in the letter from MMIA stating such. They also would not reimburse any vacation or sick leave that is paid out for the emergency people that we paid out.
Ashley, this is Tim. We did bring up the 2.7% for insurance with the budget director and his team. Obviously, a final decision has not been made on that. If it was turned down, we will bring that up at our meeting tomorrow with the budget director to see if we can get that recognized as an eligible expense.
So, Tim, if it is not currently an eligible expense and they submitted, and then it does turn into an eligible expense, will they be able to resubmit at that point?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Let's jump over to Mayor Sandra Jones in Roundup. Your mic is open.
Actually, Dan asked my question.
Oh,
It was
perfect.
answered really well about the interlocal agreement that we have for law enforcement. And so I guess the bottom line is I need to have a meeting with the county commissioners of the allocation of our part of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
And what happens if they refuse?
We'll help.
Well, yeah, Mayor, I think that, you know, that's an issue we'll have to work through. Certainly, there's a portion of their entire salary that you pay under contract. If they refuse, let us know and we'll see if we can re-engage the conversation.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to jump down to the chat box now. I don't see any more hands up at this point. Yep, okay. So is there written guidance available on the additional expenses that are being made eligible?
Yes, and I think Kelly just gave an overview on that in her presentation. That guidance is, it's built off of Treasury guidance, and it has changed many times from the beginning of the pandemic to today. And then we have, as I mentioned, our weekly meetings with the budget director and his team. And the guidance document itself is updated with every opening of reimbursable timeframes for submittal.
Great. Kelly, is there anything you want to add to that?
Can't get my thing. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm showing the guidance document here that's on their website. This one was updated for the last round of funding. They will update this again for this round of funding. So anytime there's a change in what they're going to reimburse, they'll update this guidance. So you should be seeing a new one soon. Tim says it opens on the 8th. So I would guess within the next week and a half.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you. All right. Next question is, I tried to upload the documents and for some reason it would not go through. So I missed the deadline last time. Is there another way to submit paperwork if I have the same problem this time?
We have had organizations submit the actual paper itself, if that's the case. If you're having difficulty in your submittal, I would reach directly out to local government services and coordinate with them as they're overseeing the portal and the process.
And I know there are people who have had the same problem and ended up just emailing the document. I think some groups even mailed the documents, and they're working with folks. If that's the situation they end up in, they will help you.
Yes, they will.
Okay. Thank you. The next question. Is the purchase of scanners to digitize records an acceptable expenditure?
That is the discussion we had last week, and Jason, if I don't get this right, please jump in, because Jason spearheaded this discussion, but the answer is yes. And Jason just spoke of that. Please, he recommends get pre-approval before you make that purchase so that you know it's going to be reimbursed. Pre-approval through local government services.
So if you're just going to buy a scanner or two and do the bulk of the work yourself, I think you're more than a little safe. If you're looking to go to a vendor that's going to do all the scanning for you, index so they're searchable, etc., you're talking about a different amount of money. That's what you would want pre-approval for. If you're going to spend $500 on a scanner, I think you're probably fairly safe. Submit it anyway, but I would feel comfortable saying you'd be okay with that.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, next question. Will there be special reporting requirements on the AFR or other reporting that we need to do for these reimbursed expenses?
I believe the potential exists for that, and I would definitely be coordinating with your auditor in terms of what they feel the requirements will be. In addition, and we continue to have a discussion, and I think Eric Bryson's back on the line, but it has been our view and our argument that these are reimbursed to the general fund and that the governing body allocates these funds in the future for municipal related expenditures that are necessary. I think there are a few different opinions out there. Eric, I know that we and you have been trying to coordinate to get clarification through Treasury on that. But make sure that you're coordinating with your auditor on this, on how to record it and what could potentially be audited under the Single Audit Act.
Tim, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Can I touch on this one real briefly?
Yes, please.
The negotiations are still ongoing with the state, and we have reached out to a couple different auditing firms to make sure. And the importance of this is our advocacy is to make sure that the money coming back is a reimbursement, because the state set up the system as reimbursement, doesn't prescribe the manner in which you can spend the money as it comes back in. It's not technically reimbursement money. The U.S. Treasury said it's not grant money. They have not created a reimbursement system. Only the state of Montana has. So we want you to be able to get that money back into your general fund to be used for general governmental purposes. Auditors mistakenly at this point are calling it reimbursement, and some of them are calling it grants. U.S. Treasury has said it's not grant funding. OMB, the Office of Management and Budget at the federal level, is supposed to be issuing guidance this summer to clarify what this is. What it is one-time unanticipated federal revenue. So we want you and need you to get it into your general fund so you can use it as you see fit for general governmental purposes. And if you're running into issues with your auditors, let Mr. Burton know, because we'll continue to have this advocacy across the board throughout the state of Montana. And I think the question originally started if it impacts your CAFR or your financial reporting at the end of the year. It'll show up. So yes, it will, but we want to make sure that we're all on the same page about how you're reporting this one-time unanticipated federal revenue.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. And Eric, while you're on the line, did you have any words that you'd like to say?
I do, and I apologize for that. Whatever happened at the beginning, I haven't restarted my computer in about 3 days, and I think my computer is sick of Zoom meetings as well. So my comment is thank you. The work that we have done in partnership with the League of Cities and Towns from the early days of the governor's task force, which we were both allowed to serve on, all the way through weekly meetings with the budget office to get additional clarity on what allowable CARES Act reimbursement would be, has been really helpful. And between the league and MACO in those direct meetings with the budget office, we have expanded significantly how much and what you're eligible to get through the CARES Act funding. And I think I had to hang up, but I'm sure Mr. Burton or Kelly talked about some of the wins that we've received so far. In essence, allocating about 300 million as a set aside, 10 million as a set aside for IT advancements, and then setting up a system where you can get money back for COVID-19 related costs has been significant. And I said to my members, in any other year, if the league and MACO could have come up with $300 million in cash for local governments, it would be amazing, except in the middle of a pandemic when the world's upside down and nobody knows what that really means. But it is significant, and it's in large part due to the relationship that Mako and the league have had and continue working with the governor's office. So thank you.
And thank you, Eric. I couldn't agree with your statements more. We also have some items left on the table, and we specifically left them on the table for future discussions as to how the whole reimbursement program with the total 1.25 billion is working and what the needs are in unanticipated events. And we still have on the table for a future decision the potential reimbursement of benefits for our presumptively eligible emergency services, law enforcement, fire people. And so we'll continue to discuss that with the budget office as we move toward the end of the year.
Tim, a quick follow-up on that question about the unanticipated federal revenue, the one-time only unanticipated revenue. From the county discussions at town halls, we've had some people ask, should we be spending that money that comes back in, or should we be trying not to? Do you have any advice on that?
Well, I think similar to the county's advice is, I think it's safest if you deposit that money, account for it, and await further guidance before you start spending a whole lot of it. Eric, it's my understanding that that's the advice you're giving the county members as well.
That's correct.
Great. Okay, let's jump back to the questions here. I want to make sure we have time to talk about the census as well, but these questions are important. Next question is, can we get reimbursement for costs to the sewer treatment plant for cleaning out basins caused by more people being at home all the time using flushable wipes that clog up the mechanical parts?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the specific things that we submitted to them at the beginning when you all kind of answered your survey about what kinds of costs you might be seeing. We specifically told them that that was something. I don't think I've seen anybody put in for that yet, but I think if you do, just make sure your request is very clear about, you know, kind of what your normal costs are associated with that, and just document it, and that it should be covered.
Okay. Here's another question about the contract between city and county. So what about a contract between the city and the county for the cost of dispatching services? It is a cost to the city, but is not separately claimed by the county for reimbursement.
Eric, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we went through a full discussion on dispatch and also law enforcement jail folks. And it's my understanding that dispatch is eligible. Is that correct, Eric? Yes.
It is.
It is. And so, again, there are many contracts between the cities and the counties on dispatch services, and I think that's something, and they're normally governed by a board. But I think I would engage first the 911 board, and then the city and the county to see how to equitably split those reimbursements.
Tim, I think the key to that one is who can run the personnel reports. So if it's whatever the relationship is between the two different entities, if one can run the payroll reports because they get the check from the county, but it's jointly funded by the city and the county, then if the county receives the money, they will distribute it back to the city as they need to. So payroll reports first, and what the relationship between the contract is for those multi-jurisdictional dispatch operations that have city and county interactions.
Okay. I have a question that came to me, so I can share. Can you explain why an invoice received prior to December 31st, but not paid until January is not eligible?
An invoice dated what?
Can you explain why an invoice received prior to December 31st, but not paid until January isn't eligible?
Well, we can get further clarification on that. The CARES Act law goes through the end of 2020. I think that there are some logistics we're going to have to work through, but we did get an extension that carries over the reimbursement into January of 2021. There will be some logistics, but just as I've heard many discussions, get your reimbursements in early and continue to submit. As Kelly mentioned, we have 30 plus cities and towns around Montana that have submitted for reimbursement, which means there's another 80 or 90 organizations that have not submitted at all. So we really want you to submit, and if you haven't submitted, please submit in September and continue to submit through the end of the year. It helps us track the money in and the money out. And what we are trying to prevent is an onslaught of reimbursements all at the same time at the end of December, which creates staffing, logistical, and other difficulties. So please talk to your folks and have them start preparing. If you haven't submitted, start preparing for that September deadline now. And you can, if you, as you're filling out the form, have questions, contact us at the league or reach out directly to local government services because they provide assistance to you as well.
And is there a possibility that the local government reimbursement money will run out before all costs have been reimbursed?
Well, and Eric, I'd like you to jump in on this too. We've certainly had discussions, and the Treasury guidance recommends that the state distribute 45% of the CARES Act dollars to local government. 300 million is not 45%. It is less than that. And the discussions that we've had with the budget office is let's walk down this road and make decisions as we have better information. That was the recommendation out of the task force, and that's the way we've handled our discussions with the budget office. When we originally, as a group, decided to say, as a minimum, we'll set aside 300 million through the end of the year for local government reimbursements. If the reimbursements exceed that amount, then we're in a position that we've already talked about to see what additional allocations are necessary to fully fund the local government reimbursement program. Eric, do you have anything to add in that regard?
No, that was perfect.
The last guidance is dated 7/13/20. Is that still the most updated guidance that we have?
Yeah, I think I already responded to that.
Okay.
They will update it again in the next week and a half, and that includes the form too.
Okay, great. The form for the September deadline? Yeah, okay, great. Has anyone submitted longevity as part of the base wage and been reimbursed for the costs related to law enforcement and fire department staff?
The way I think that you should submit it is longevity is just a part of salary. So if you submit it as salary, then it's not confusing to the people at local government who are processing the payments. If you separate it out, then it creates additional questions. And I know that there have been questions from counties where that has been a discussion too. So our recommendation is that you just put salary and longevity together and submit it as salary.
What is the process for having expenses pre-approved?
I think you reach out to Cheryl Gray and her team at Local Government Services, explain what expenses it is that you are talking about, eligible expenses, and let them know that you're preparing to proceed once they let you know that it's an eligible reimbursable expense.
And on both the local government website that I gave you and the Commerce website, there is the email to reach them.
Next question. If we work from home and we've set up a static router that will raise the cost of the Wi-Fi to be whitelisted, will that be covered? Also, if our software company charges us to use their software, is that covered also?
We are currently defining what's eligible under the 10 million set aside. I think that that's a good question to reach out to local government services and make sure that it's pre-approved before you submit it. But I think there's a good argument to be made that that should be an eligible, reimbursable expense.
Maybe we'd have Jason jump in here, but it's my understanding expenses associated with folks quarantine and work from home are COVID related expenses. That's something different than the $10 million software IT stuff.
Correct. So if you need to buy a laptop to have somebody work remotely, the laptop would be eligible.
And so I can't tell from the chat either what type of software they're talking about. But if it's something associated, it just has to be COVID related. So if you had software already that you were using for something, if it's being the same, you're using it the same than you were before, probably not. But if you can document that you're using it more or you're using it for a COVID related purpose, then maybe.
We had somebody ask if the deadlines to submit are posted, and Kelly responded, no, they're not. But she also posted in the chat the upcoming deadlines. I'm just going to read those so we have them for the folks who watch the recording that don't have the chat. So September 25th, it will be the deadline for all expenses up through August 31st. November 20th will be the deadline for expenses up through October 31st. And January 31st, 2021 will be the deadline for expenses up through December 30th. Now, if they don't submit something, say we have a claim from March or April that hasn't been submitted yet, can they submit them in the last round? Is that acceptable?
Yes, but I will call and yell at them.
Okay. So the idea is we don't want to wait till the end, right? We don't want to get these all stacked up at the end. But if you didn't get a chance to submit and you have an eligible expense, make sure to submit that whenever there's an open time. You don't have to just do just that period. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
If you have not submitted, you can go all the way back to the March 12th and move forward to the end of August in this next one.
Okay.
So the other thing is we do provide information on the reimbursement program through Amanda on our weekly bulletin as well. And hopefully you are all receiving that.
Okay. Real quick, the software they were talking about was Black Mountain software needed on a private computer to work from home.
Right. So if it's the additional expense of like another license or something to put it on your computer at home, which you had to do because of COVID related, then yes, I think that's probably eligible.
Yeah.
And that's not related to the $10 million additional. I mean, unless Eric's looking like he's kind of rolling his eyes, but I don't think that's related to the $10 million that we're talking about to digitize public records.
It should not be.
Okay. Switching topics here, can you claim the wages paid to an employee that had to be quarantined under the 80 hours?
No, so that's what I was speaking about with COVID leave. The only time they're going to reimburse COVID leave expenses, because leave is essentially budgeted, is to cover actual expenditures that you incur as a result of that leave. So if you hired a temp to cover someone, or if you paid someone another employee overtime to cover that person's work, then those types of expenses would be covered, but otherwise, no.
Besides an emergency declaration, should a city have a resolution to request the additional funding, and does any of the emergency fund apply to this situation?
Well, I don't think that you need an emergency declaration to request the reimbursements. You are eligible under the program, and there is a certification that goes along with the reimbursement form that you have to sign off saying that this is the true and eligible expenses that the local government has incurred.
Okay.
I'm
All
not
right.
quite sure I understand the emergency funds question, Keisha. If you want to maybe give a little bit more detail on that, we can see if we can answer that.
Okay. So we'll have you guys talk about that if there's more information, or if she gets in here with the chat, we'll add that. But I think we have another topic we need to cover. Is that right, Tim?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
With Mr. Zach Brown. And it's the response to the census. And we do have some COVID-related dollars available if you choose to assist. And Ashley, with that, I'd like to have Zach Brown explain how the program's working.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, and my name's Zach Brown. I am doing some contract work for the Montana Nonprofit Association, helping with rural census participation and outreach. I want to clarify that I do not work for, nor do I represent the U.S. Census Bureau. And I'll just leave it at that. I can't speak for them, nor would I want to at this point, candidly. But our effort is funded by the CARES Act. We are partnering with 3 other nonprofits, Western Native Voice and Forward Montana, to reach hard to count populations in the state. And Montana's overall census participation rate at this point is a little less than 60%, which puts us at about 46th out of 50 states in the country. So we are very far behind, and COVID has severely disrupted many of their rural outreach efforts and many of their efforts just in general. So for example, our neighbor in Idaho they received census employee enumerators who were knocking doors starting in early July. Folks started knocking doors in Montana in mid-August. So we're just way far behind. We have a higher proportion of hard to count states. And for those of you that represent rural towns, you will know that one gaping gap in their system is that they won't send any mail or census packet information to PO boxes. And many folks that live in rural places on county roads, on farms and ranches, receive their mail in town. And so that's just one example that really puts rural communities at a disadvantage in terms of getting a complete count in their communities. So we're trying to help. The effort that I want to talk to you all about today is we worked with the League and with MACO to get census promotion mail and advertising as a pre-approved reimbursable expense under the CARES Act. And so in line with everything that you've been talking about already this morning, we're encouraging local governments to consider sending out mail and consider advertising and other creative ways to promote census participation. And if any of you choose to do that, we and our partners are here to assist you in that effort. And so, for example, with counties, and Jason has been our main point of contact and a huge help with this effort. We're working with county commissioners. We have a template postcard that provides contextual information about why the census is so important in your community, and then gives a 1-800 number and the website to which people can come in and complete the census. It gives them the information they need to execute their census participation. The mail would come from you as community leaders, and we feel like that's a very important principle. So if I sent out mail or Tim and Kelly did, it wouldn't have the same impact with your constituents as it would coming from you with your name on it. And so we're encouraging local government leaders to participate in that way. We send these out every door direct, and so it's a cheaper postage rate, and it's also covering people that would not have previously received mail because it covers business addresses as well as post office boxes. The quick steps with that mail program, if you reach out to me and say, I'd like to do this in my community, we would send you a draft postcard template for your review. And as soon as you give us the thumbs up, we would initiate the printing and mail process for your zip code. And your community would receive the bill, probably your city clerk in this case, and pay the bill and then submit for reimbursement. And it's also worth, the last thing I'll say is these are relatively minor expenses. And I know cash flow is always tight with local governments, and you all are incredibly careful stewards of your taxpayer resources. But in most cases, I'd imagine, unless we're talking the 7 big towns, we're talking expenses that are less than $1,000 in 90% of cases. So it's a relatively minor expense that can have a really big impact and help reach those folks that have not yet been reached by census efforts. And so with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions or work with any of you offline, and I will put my email and my cell phone number in the chat. So you're welcome to follow up with me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zach.
Did you have anything to add, Kelly, to what Zach shared?
I mean, I have put together a list of the communities that are either low census responding or have areas in their city that is low responding. And I don't know if that would be helpful for people to know that they are. Okay, that's something that we can post then, at least send out to those communities that are. There's about 60 of them, I believe.
Thank you, Kelly. It looks like there is some interest in that list, so I think that might be helpful for some folks. And thank you, Zach. We appreciate your time. If anybody has questions for Zach right now, so we don't keep him on a WebEx longer than he absolutely has to be, now is a good time to ask either in the chat or via raising your hand so we can see that you want to do it with your mic. And while we wait for those, Zach, I'm just going to read your information back in here so the folks that are on the recording that don't see the chat have access to it. So your email is zachary.brown, ZACHARY.BROWN @hotmail.com. And your phone number where you can be reached is 406-579-5697. Does that all sound right? Good. Okay. Let me just run up here and see if we have a question. Can the counties also send out those postcards and apply for reimbursement?
Yes, as can tribal governments. So that's a great question. In some of your counties, you may have already received some of one of these postcards. And MNA, Montana Nonprofit Association, also sent out a statewide postcard that targeted our low response tracks. One common question I get is, well, so-and-so, say our county government already did this, why should I do it? Keep in mind that some of your constituents, and especially if you're in a rural community or a rural county, probably some of them have at most received one contact attempt from the Census Bureau, and in some cases they have not heard from them at all. And I live in Bozeman. In Gallatin County, most of our residents have probably, if I hadn't responded yet, which I did back in February, I probably would have received up to 6 or 7 contact attempts by now. So the way that their process works and reaches out to communities is not an equitable process, and it puts rural constituents and rural people at a disadvantage. And so in some cases, your constituents have had very few opportunities to even learn how to complete the census. So it's important from my point of view, if you are in one of those low response rate tracks, and maybe your county commission already sent out a mailer, I would argue that you should send one out as well. It's a relatively minor expense, and many of those people need to hear from you multiple times before they actually take the step to complete their census. So we would we would really love any help you all are able to provide, and we're here to serve you if you do require any assistance.
And Zach, can you tell us again, when is the census deadline, or when does this need to be done?
The census needs to be completed now. That's our message. That's another complicating issue here, is that the deadline has been jerked around multiple times, and at the moment they're going to stop counting people on September 30th, which is alarming in many respects because many of our counties are below 40%. I think 20 some counties in Montana have a less than 40% response rate at this point. So and 7 have less than 30%. So we're in a tough spot. But so the answer to that question is, your folks need to respond now, and we can cross our fingers that they move that deadline back. But that is not in the cards at the moment. At the moment, they're going to stop counting on September 30th, which gives us 5 weeks to go.
Okay. So if a mailer is going to go out, they need to contact you like as soon as they possibly can to get those out and in the mail and give people time to respond before that deadline.
Yeah, that's right. We would encourage you to jump in as soon as possible, and we're ready to go. We've got a template ready to go, and we've got a print shop that has helped us get out about 50,000 of these postcards already. So we've got a system in place, and we're excited to help. If you are a large urban city, relatively a large in the Montana sense, we may ask you if you have staff capacity to take some of these logistics on. We may lean on or let you run with this a little bit because we're focused on adding capacity maybe for those cities and towns that don't have as much staff capacity or resources to execute this kind of thing. But for example, Missoula County did one of these, and they're targeting, they're not sending it countywide, but they're targeting their tracks and their areas that are low response rates, so some of the more rural parts of the county. So we can also help bigger counties identify those lower response rate tracks and just target those.
Okay, great. We've had a couple people in the chat post some things that they've done. So posting information on your municipal website or on social media outlets, including a mailer in your water bill that goes out to everybody. So there's different things that you can look at doing. But if you do need help or you are interested in any kind of help at all, please reach out to Zach as soon as you can and get that moving, because that deadline's coming up quick.
Hey, this is Kelly. We had a little small grant program come from the National League of Cities to help increase census participation. This was back in the spring. And I think it's Cascade or maybe Shoto got one of those grant awards, and of course it had to be modified given the COVID situation, but they were going to do a pizza party with computers set up so people could come in, get pizza for free, and just do their census response there. They changed it into just basically giving them a coupon for pizza. So, I mean, you can get pretty creative in the ways that you can encourage people to respond to the census.
Thanks, Kelly. And that I have to jump in and say that is an organizing tactic that we are using in some places. So in a couple weeks, for example, in White Sulphur Springs, the brewery is going to shut down one block of their street front property, and we're going to have an outdoor event with census employees there with iPads and hotspots ready to just help people fill out the census. Senior centers have been really active participants in some of the communities we're working with. One issue in a lot of small towns and rural communities is broadband access and internet access. And so in some cases, the librarian or the senior center director just needs to be there to help somebody go through the steps on a computer. So, if you have any ideas or want to organize events in your community, we're all ears, and great point, Kelly. Just had to jump on there.
Great. And that looks like it was Cascade that did that pizza party idea. So they might have some good ideas. Question, are those grant funds still available to apply for? Kelly says, no, unfortunately that grant is over, but maybe talk with some local businesses to see if they'd be willing to help. So there's several ways you could look at raising some funds for this, right? So yeah, get creative. There's all kinds of ways to do that, and people like to respond to things that aren't just a mailer, right? Get to, especially right now, a little bit of interaction is going to go a long way with people. So that's great. Any other thoughts on the census stuff before we jump back? There's just a couple questions that came in about the CARES Act money that I want to make sure we don't miss. But is there anything else on census that anybody wants to add before we let Zach go on about his day?
Thank you for your time, Zach. I much appreciate it.
Thank you all so much for your leadership, and yeah, be in touch anytime. Thanks for having me.
Great. Okay, so let's jump back and make sure we don't miss these, and we'll try to wrap this up so we can get you guys on with your afternoon, but these are important. And if you have any other questions that you want to ask, now's a great time to get them in the chat box before we end. But the next question is, do you have to submit separately for each deadline if you don't get in when you should have? So for example, if I'm claiming expenses that should have been submitted on an earlier deadline, do you just submit all of them on September 25th and they figure out by the invoices that they were earlier expenses?
Yes, if you have not submitted as of yet, in the September timeframe, I would go all the way back to March 12th and bring that forward and catch up on your reimbursable expenses.
And
And then, go ahead, Kelly.
Oh, I was just going to add, and I've even heard of situations where people have already put in, but then they forgot something that was eligible. You can add that to a later request as well.
Yes, and I would just add that, you know, and I take my hat off to the group, the budget director and his team, the folks at Local Government Services. As Eric said, the cooperation between the counties and the cities. We built this program on the run. And so just because you haven't hit the deadline, and the original deadlines were very quick turnarounds, doesn't mean that those expenditures become ineligible because you haven't requested them yet. So let's take this opportunity leading up to September to catch up. And I would also ask, particularly with the Clerks Association, you folks talk to each other all the time. Please help those governments that haven't submitted yet to know that they need to do that starting now. So if you could help us get the word out, that would be great. We have reached out as well, but any assistance in getting the word out to move these cities and towns toward getting the reimbursements in would be much appreciated.
Tim, a follow-up on that last question. So do you have to do separate drawdown forms that state the time frame, or just add them all together on the September form?
I believe you can just add them all together on the September form, but each reimbursable request will have its own dates relative to what pay period for the police, etc.
Okay. Okay. All right, I think that catches us up on all of the questions that we have. If I missed anyone, please shout out and let me know. Tim, Kelly, Dan, is there anything else while we wait for that you guys want to add that we haven't covered?
Well, no, I don't have anything to add, but I will say that Dan and Ashley, working with you folks, I would like to continue these every other week for the foreseeable future, so that we can continue to support the efforts of not only the reimbursement program, but any other issues that come up. And so we'll continue to coordinate with the local government center to keep this going.
That sounds great. And we appreciate the partnership with the league. I think anytime that we can work together is always, it's great for the center. We appreciate and enjoy that partnership, but I think it's also great for the municipalities around the state. Dan, do you want to add anything to that?
No, and I just want to thank everyone for joining us. At one point, we had 85 people participating, so we hope that some good information has been transferred. A lot of questions been asked, and so that we could be active both in pursuing the reimbursement, but as also participating in the census. Both of those things are critical, and it's a challenging time to have to manage all this. But I know we're here to support you, so we wish you luck and hope you can stay safe, avoid the impact of the pandemic in your community and in your own lives and families. So wish you well.
And this recording will be available likely tomorrow morning. Sometimes it processes quicker, but typically it's somewhere between around 12 hours. So watch for that both from the MSU LGC site and then through MMIA and the Montana League's communication with everybody. I'll turn it over to Tim and Kelly for any closing remarks.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for their time. I know that Amanda has been reaching out with you. We've got our conference coming up in October 6th, 7th, and 8th, and I think the registration opened yesterday. We've got a heck of a good agenda coming together on that. And so please, if you have the opportunity, register. With that, I think that I hope this has been useful and a good use of your time. Kelly, do you have anything to close with?
No, thanks all. I know you'll reach us if you need to.
Amanda, I see you're up. Do you have anything? Okay. Ashley, I think then that's a wrap, and we'll be reaching out to everybody on the schedule for the next time we provide a town hall meeting in partnership with the local government center.
That sounds great. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate the co-hosting, and thank you to everybody for joining. We'll talk to you soon. Stay safe.
Thanks, everybody.